Welcome to Energypreneurs, the podcast where solar power batteries and electric vehicles come together. I'm your host, Sohail Hasnie. When we combine these technologies, something powerful happens. On this show, I speak with founders, engineers, and investors who are building this fantastic new energy system. Thank you for joining. Welcome to Energypreneurs. I am sitting here outside in sunny Queensland, Sunshine Coast. I meant to do a summary for the year, but I never got the time to do it before the year ended. So here I thought, just take you through. This is quite a lovely setting. If I stand up a bit, see, this is gorgeous Queensland. So I learned many things in the entire years. Those who may have missed the podcast, I thought this may be an opportunity to take you through what did we learn. One of the key takeaway was the consumer-led rooftop solar in Australia is really transforming the energy system. And this is very unique to Australia. We started with very little solar 2008 and 9, and now one of the highest per capita rooftop solar in Australia. And it's been breaking records after, and right now, with the battery subsidies that are coming in, it's really going to be a very big cultural, behavioral, and economic transformation all happen bottom up. And if you want to find out a bit more on this topic, I think the Tim Buckley episode 291 and Stephanie Bashir also episode 292, they really talked about these points. And of course, we had many speakers from the entire year focus on these topics. And if you look a bit more on this topic, you will find that Australia now leads the rooftop solar per capita. The daytime demand, like a day like this, are mostly made by rooftop solars. So my households in Melbourne, I can go in and switch the aircon. It's running flat chat. It's coming from the 10 kilowatt rooftop solar. And that's not me, that's everywhere. Everyone is doing things. And traditional utilities right now are struggling because the daytime demand and along with the daytime revenue is completely gone. And the distribution networks, not the generation companies, are the next challenge because the generation has taken over by rooftop solar. And this consumer-led revolution has also helped consumers to move away from gas gradually. I have an all-electric home, but I think more and more we'll see all-electric homes are becoming dominant. And those companies who were sort of built around fixed supply margin are also seeing an interesting change because the electricity supply dynamics have changed, and government is talking about taking electricity and providing for free 3 hours in a day. And that's where part of will change the dynamics. You take this rooftop solar and give it away as a free electricity. When it happens, that means whether you have a solar on your roof or not, you get that benefit. So issue next is the biggest change agent in energy. It was not the government or a power company. It was millions of household customers. That's the key takeaway from Australia. Now, if we take the next topic that came out, again, Tim Buckley said quite a bit about that, and Gavin Duffy on episode 267. It was the free or ultra cheap electricity is emerging everywhere. I always said electricity is going to be free. Electricity will be too cheap to meter. I mean, there are a lot of opposition in Central Asia when we discuss those points, but it's happening right now because certain times of the day, because of excessive solar, there's a negative wholesale price in the market because some of the large coal companies have to be negative to stay on so that when the demand comes back, they don't have to ramp up quickly, but they stay on tariffs. So I think with the automation and the way electric vehicles are being penetrating everywhere, the charging of EVs, heating, water, cooling spaces, all of this can be done at almost net zero cost. The daytime electricity exactly a day like this here, I'm in Queensland. Traditionally, it was always the middle of the day. That's what the domestic customers' demand was high because of the air conditioning load. Now that game is changing completely because the middle of the day now, in a day like this, sun is there and demand is becoming really low. The power companies have to give actually incentive to people consume electricity during the day. And the EVs, especially if they are charging during the day, that helps. Is the thermostat to pre-cool households during summertime or wintertime, preheat the slab heatings. So those benefits are coming in because of this cheap electricity. And also, I've seen many, many years ago that there was a companies who are making ice cubes during the day and using those ice cube, the heat, the cold captures the latent heat and others during nighttime cool. So I think the long duration storage arbitrage between abundance and scarcity, this would be interesting. And especially now that the government is talking about the free electricity during the 3 hours. So it's not theory anymore for electricity. They're going to appear in real offering. So that's extraordinary from Australia. And I'm planning to do a debate around this for electricity in the coming weeks. Now, the other emerging topic is vehicle to grid, which will redefine the role of electric vehicles into Australian power system, because electric vehicles are simply not transportation vehicles or with the unidirectional charging, a consumer of electricity. Because of bidirectional charging, they're also bringing electricity back to the grid, whether it's a vehicle to load or vehicle to home, V2H, or vehicle to grid. And we discuss quite extensively that how this V2G will turn millions of cars and buses into massive distribution electricity generation system. Steve Letende talked about that on episode 273. Job Berger talked about this on episode 285, and Stanley Choi from Sunny also talked about that in episode 293. So his simple message is the individual EV battery often exceeds the size of a home battery. You walk into any electricity car showroom, EV battery typically 60 kilowatt hours, 75, 50 kilowatt hours, which is obviously 3 to 4 times larger, even 5 times larger than the 12 now or 13 kilowatt hour battery that typically available, including the Tesla Powerwall. Now, bidirectional chargers are becoming commercially available. That will change the whole dynamic system, and also the electric vehicle's ability to be a backup power during outages increases customer appeals. And then the fleet of charging depots become virtual power plants. My most sort of appealing concept here is if you just take a 100 buses, 10 by 10, if each of them can do about 10 kilowatt, that's about 10 megawatt power stations. If they can do 100 kilowatt each times 10 by 10, which is 100, 100 times 100 is 10,000 kilowatt, which is 10 megawatts. So as simple as that. And this, all those EVs, if they are connected, can also defer the costly grid upgrades in the constrained neighborhood. So we were to think that EVs were about wheels. Now we see they're about batteries connected to the market. So if you want a bit more, look at episode 273, 285, 293, and we also broadly discuss in other areas. The other area very interesting. Traditionally, we used to think that mining are really not off-grid, but this trend of heavy industry and mining that are electrifying everywhere, these hard to abate areas actually moving quite faster than everyone predicted. Mining tracks, excavators, and the whole sort of energy system at a site are now going electricity, basically cutting diesel use and enabling renewable powered sort of extraction. So minings are operating mines as it is, plenty of sun out there, especially in Australia, and then use that electricity into tractors, trucks, excavators to get the mining. So this was a hard to abate sort of industry, but they're moving fast. And we learned quite a bit from Stanley Choi in episode 293, Daniel Blakely again, episode 265. The main takeaway points are large haul trucks, really now available as fully electric platform. There are site-wide microgrids that are integrating renewable energy, batteries, and charging. And there are quite a lot of maintenance saving come as well, because there are few moving parts. On an electric car, of course, these machines even more. Worker safety suddenly improving because noise and emissions are dropping dramatically. And they have now credible decarbonizing plan that are being implemented in a short notice. And electrified mines are also stimulating adjacent renewable energy project, because if you see in the neighborhood someone doing a large renewable, of course, all the other sort of peripheral areas also gets motivated to move into renewable. And this automation also pairs very nicely with electric drive systems because the control are much, much quicker and simpler. So mines are actually becoming laboratories for full-scale electrification faster than anyone could think of. And now the next topic, the hydrogen. Hydrogen always needed a reality check, not just a hype by the marketing people, the people who didn't understand the underlying thermodynamics of it. So hydrogen remained important in 2025, but it brought into the reality check. It's not universal substitute of fuel, and there are huge sort of conversion losses. So there may be few applications that can benefit from hydrogen, not everyday vehicles, home heating, you name it. And the two episodes where I highlighted this was episode 287 with Michael Sura and with Masami on episode 289. Especially on the hydrogen side, sort of the very simple principle that came through and had the reality check that converting electricity to hydrogen wastes about 60 to 80% in the process. It really doesn't make sense. And that's why hydrogen cars, the dream of Toyota, Mirai, and others, have been overtaken by EV because of just cost and efficiency sense. And it really doesn't make sense use the solar power, convert that into hydrogen through electrolysis and other process. Then again, run through a power system to get the same kilowatt hour back. Simply doesn't make sense, especially for electric vehicles, even for large trucks. That's what we are seeing. That's what the market is telling us today. Then the issue comes up, what about ammonia? Shipping ammonia is quite complex and a lot of safety issues, and a lot of people argue ammonia goes to urea. So its best use is in fertilizers, maybe in green steel making, chemicals, and niche maritime application, not everywhere. And big infrastructure investments were taken by government, supported by government. That created a stranded asset risk because the hypes actually drove them. But in 2025, we saw a lot of reality check because, in simple terms, renewable energy, you need a large scale of renewable energy to make green hydrogen break even. less than 0.25 cents a kilowatt hour. And policymakers increasingly require some techno-economic justification, not just the political. So the conclusion that came through, especially through Michael Sura and episode 287 and then episode 289, that hydrogen is quite a silver bullet. It's a very specialized surgical instrument. It has to be used with care, not for everything. And with that came through the other topic, that hydropower. Yes, hydropower lost its popularity because of the flooding, because of the need of a large reservoir. But we should not forget the hydropower are the long duration storage as renewable energy projects, because water can be retained on a reservoir for years. And that's what we have seen in countries like Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. Their large hydropower plants can store seasonal, and that's how the Soviet Union set up those systems. Tajik and Kyrgyz during winter time will get electricity from the Kazakhs with their coal, but summertime they will supply hydropower. So we listened to Mike Westerman about these topics. So he was arguing the solar's daily variability requires intraday and seasonal storage, and pipe hydro is the proven gigawatt scale. So if we look at that, pumped hydro is a proven gigawatt scale storage. And this is what Mike argued, that hydropower not only do that, it can also do some inertia and black start capabilities through sophisticated reservoir management. Maybe some of the ecological disruption could be minimized, and social acceptance and resettlement issues also can be handled ethically, but it's the long lead time of hydropower is the tricky question, because financing for hydropowers and sort of projects with the pump hydro, it's easier than unproven storage technologies because everybody understands. And long duration storage is what is needed to have our ambition for 100% renewable. So if we say solar is the new coal, then obviously hydropower could be the new backbone for reliability. So this is something that Mike Westerman kept on arguing. Now, the biggest trend that we have seen is that electric mobility is moving far beyond just the private car. The real AV story is not about Tesla Model S or the expensive luxury cars. It's the public and commercial transport that's reshaping urban air quality, noise level, and especially for the countries that import fuel, the fuel imports. So we listened from Mani Biona on episode 286. We listened from Daisy Verdi, episode 284, and Stanley Choi also, episode 293. And their talking points was jeepneys, tricycles, tuk-tuk that dominate the Asian's urban mobility scene are being transported in large scale to electric. And that's going to make a big dent, especially say in the case of Philippines, the electric tricycle, 3, 4, 5 million of those, if they can move to electric, that can have a huge impact, especially if you go to an island like Boracay, where 100% are electric, you can see the noise level down so much. Then, of course, the bus fleets, they create most emission reduction per vehicle, the school vehicles and others. So a lot of buses, school buses becoming buses during the day and the night, potentially through V2G. Those buses through V2G can be a power station, as we discussed before. And then in some cases, with Daisy argued that retrofits can enable faster impact than complete fleet replacement, because this is my pet topic also. Say in the case of the Philippines, they have a lot of jeepneys. it may be worthwhile. I know that a lot of people disagree, but this could be converted into full electric. Then the charging depots could become a community infrastructure node, especially if it's a bi-directional chargers. Car parks can be, depending on the time of the day, either energy consuming hub or a power station. The health benefit, that reduction of sort of noise and sort of particulate pollution coming from these tricycles, some of them are sort of two-stroke engines, could be quite significant. And then if the government have policies focusing conversion of fleet, then that also impacts, like Australian government has quite a number of initiatives for converting commercial fleets into electric, and that helps because these cars get recycled in the second-hand market within the 8 to 9 months, so create a second-hand sort of EV industry. So I think the global EV revolution finally is happening, but not in just luxury cars and fleets, buses, and working vehicles. And it's making a huge impact. Just have to look around. What BYD has done quietly in the last couple of years, it's phenomenal. Then one topic which Daisy Verdi on episode 284 from Canada kept on arguing, that the fleet operators face huge capital barriers because if you want to buy everything brand new, but conversion of existing vehicles to electric may be a faster choice because as batteries has become almost close to $70-80 a kilowatt hour, and if the bus has say 100 kilowatt hour battery, and at that price is not much cost of batteries. And then the thing that we are seeing globally happening, and we discuss with Nicole Mao from Bangladesh, who is doing a battery swapping for tricycles, and those battery swapping stations can have quite a significant impact with the retrofit cars. And it's a lower cost of entry for especially for small transportation companies. You can create a local job market for retrofit specialists. And we don't have to hear noises like this. This motorcycle just passed me. So I think we need some sort of government certification framework and all of those, because at the end of the day, retrofits don't just save emissions, it can save time and cost. The next topic is obviously the electric vehicles. Like I was watching some jet ski being operated earlier here, just behind me, and that can be all electric very easily. And electric ferries are already operating in open sea routes. We can see solar assist and hybrid systems. The International Maritime Organizations are tightening regulations to putting into pressure on shipping emissions. And I think all of those will help, especially the batteries for EVs, as they put the pressure. And I have some visitors here also. I think. And these communities, because every time there is a petrol speedboat passing through, there are oil leakages, and that can interfere with the local communities. And all those island and river systems can be early adopters. I mean, there is an opportunity maybe with biofuels, but for eventually electric is the way. And that's what we heard from Hans Henning Judek on episode 288 and Angus McDonald's on episode 281. This is all about clean shipping, how it is moving from concept to deployment. So it's not just no longer a feasibility study, it's a procurement decision that one has to make. How do we go into electrifying boats and ships? And then finally, I think the 10th point is that AI and digitalization are transforming the energy system. I like the point that made across episode 255 to 68 is that the impact of power industry on AI will be quite limited compared to the AI's impact on the power industry because of predictive maintenance schedule, unplanned outages. AI can improve the forecasting, especially for renewable dispatch. The digital twins can educate us how to optimize the networks, and cybersecurity risks along those things will change dramatically because of AI. And AI can also help us make better tariff designs and provide the right incentive. So we are very hopeful. So it's the clean energy transition is also a software transition we should not forget. So anyway, I'll keep on doing maybe another 10 points as I go along, summarizing all the episodes from last year. Thank you for joining this episode. So I am here in Queensland, Sunshine Coast, very sunny day. And on a day like this is where really bottom-up energy is transforming Australia's power sector because every rooftop is generating electricity more than what they are consuming. I summarized about 10 different items that I learned, my takeaway from last year's episode when I was in Sunshine Coast. Today, here I'm in Melbourne, my backyard. In this setting, let me go through overall. I wanted to cover the 20. So, number 11 was that for developing countries, development finance actually determines the speed of transition. And we talked to Robert Scholhammer and Curtis Chin on those two topics. And the thing that came through was MDBs must be willing to take calculated risks. They must not just go for low hanging fruit, they must target high hanging fruit. That's something Robert mentioned, and I think that was a really good takeaway. And also, blended finance, concessional finance, actually helps to fast track many of those energy transition projects for the developing countries. So, the guarantees and credit enhancement remains really powerful, and outcome is these things has not been taken quite seriously. Development banks are really not taking risk as they would. They should. So the projects are still facing the procedural delays, and that's sometimes killing a lot of good ideas. And the project finance still sort of project preparation finance still underfunded globally in developing Asia. And the key takeaway from there was that money is there, a lot of money is there, but risk appetite is not. So that was one of the key takeaway. The development finance determines the speed of the transition. And then we heard from a number of guests, and the conclusion was the community energy model increases resilience and trust. So in that discussion, it was very clear that the microgrids and energy systems that are distributed, that are working with local communities, accelerating a lot of those progress. And especially when the national grid is failing in many cases, was unreliable. And one of the example was case for Pakistan, what has happened, they have grown dramatically. Rooftop solar, just a community-based development. So there were the few of the takeaway was the microgrid can maintain service during weather disasters. Communities show higher acceptance when they co-own these projects. But important part is the governance model must develop alongside with the technology. Technology alone is not bringing the solution. And when we have decentralization, that also reduces some of the corruption choke points that also came out. So overall, The message was in this theme of discussion that community energy is not just electricity, it's the self-reliance aspect that is very important. Then number 13, if you like, the point was, I really wholeheartedly believed in this, that we have the technology to tackle climate change. I have in this house, I have rooftop solar, I have batteries, I have electric car up there. Today, relatively hot day. Yesterday was a very hot day. We ran air conditioner in every room and it was free. It's just coming from sun. This was unthinkable when this house was built 30 years ago, that we will be generating electricity of our own. So now a lot of this got accelerated in Australia because of policy design, not because of technology. Technology is there. Technology has progressed quite a fast speed. And so that episode, the takeaway point came out was most solutions actually exist. The difference now, the policy clarity sometime helps execute things faster. And Hub Burger, episode 285, Manny Biona, episode 286, highlighted these 2 points, that how policy discussion helped Philippines in fast-tracking electric vehicle. That's now happening, and in Norway, in other countries. So tariff reform actually helps more than subsidies, maybe, because it provides those incentives. And without the policy uncertainty, that kills. Without the policy uncertainty, there won't be private sector investment this way or that way, because without that, it kills private initiative. I think that particular part came through very clearly, that policy design, policy clarity, policy transparency are very important now that technology is here. And the key takeaway from that overall discussion with different of my podcast guests, energy transition has become a policy design exercise right now. Solar is everywhere. We have one of the highest rooftop solar in Australia, and soon batteries. And this all been driven by policies. Of course, that helps the early adopters to come in. Then the large middle part comes in. And by the time prices have come down so much that everyone comes in. So I think that was one of the key takeaway. Then number 14, an issue that was raised originally by Gavin Duffy in episode 267, and also Curtis Chin on episode 290, that yes, transition is good, but energy equity is coming to center stage now. We have to make sure the transition is fair, because like in Australia, if you have a house, you can put a rooftop solar. If you're a renter, you cannot. So you miss out those benefits. And Australian government is trying to do, which is I hear a lot of controversy about free electricity for 3 hours during the day. So whether you have rooftop solar or not, you benefit from that solar others have. That policy might be interesting for many countries to look at, because on a sunny day like this here in Melbourne, I'll be producing way more than what I need and my neighbors, others doing. And that surplus needs to go and meet the demand everywhere, so that overall we don't need to bring electricity from fossil fuels. And that reality could be in many, many countries. So key takeaway from was that just transition is not a charity, it's a political reality. People should not just think that we need to provide just transition because we have to be fair and we have to do things properly. But the main issue is it's a political reality that governments have to think through, because if everyone is not bringing to the game, this transition is not going to be complete. Then item 15, which I liked, we had a lot of discussion with Dr. Ancha Srinivasan, my colleague from the Asian Development Bank, that Agriculture is also becoming a clean energy frontier. I also discussed that with Tim Ryan. Similarly, you put up a wind turbine, and that brings an income stream, and that helps the country to move into energy transition. We talked about others on agrivoltaic. You put solar panel, and underneath plants are growing, underneath farms are growing, animals are growing. So Dr. highlighted a few of the things that agrivoltaics allows simultaneous food and energy production from the same land. Of course, then the next biggest thing is in dry places like did solar run irrigation. You don't have to run those old diesel pump to move around water within an irrigation system or within a field. And other thing that Ancha highlighted, I clearly remember that his message was be a employer, don't be employee. And a lot of rural youth entrepreneurs are coming in as incomes in those businesses are growing. The women farmers are benefiting disproportionately when energy becomes available, and cold chains reduces waste and spoilage, and low carbon agriculture opens carbon markets also for carbon trading. So overall, this was a very highlight to me also that how agriculture industry is becoming one of the big beneficial for cheap electricity. And the fundamental, when I was doing the hydroponics, I used to always say, if electricity becomes free, we can move water for free, we can grow food for free, and well, everything becomes very free. So this is a very important plan. So the main tagline there was the farms are turning into power plants that also grow food. That's quite extraordinary. So that was item number 15. But then one discussion that came from Candice Miller, episode 282, which was kind of interesting to me. Her view was that US energy transition could be messy, but it's unstoppable because the state level leadership hadn't been quite decisive. Inflation Reduction Act that triggered a lot of manufacturer expansion. The storage growth is beating all expectations, and corporate procurement are driving renewables, although maybe the political sort of thinking has changed, but that momentum that got created, it's continuing and it is going to continue. It will not be reversed. So that was her view. Number 17 episode where I talked to Massimiliano Salvo, and then on episode 289, where he picked up very interesting point that the Middle East is pursuing strategic energy diversification. Oil economies are the one looking at development plans beyond hydrocarbons. And this is one interesting topic for sure, because one of the Saudi oil ministers said many years back, and I used that quote extensively, that Stone Age came to an end not because they ran out of stone, because they saw technology. Similarly, oil will come to an end, and this the oil producer who are thinking ahead and growing investment, large amount of investment in solar. And of course, we all know that Saudi Arabia delivered one of the lowest global solar price for electricity to bring in large companies. Then sovereign wealth funds still driving large scale project, desalination increasing powered by renewable energies. New value chains are also being experimented, green steel, of course, hydrogen, ammonia. And then they are also looking at how to do the workforce transition, because that remains a challenge. And they're also looking at regional market expansion. So it reminds me one project, though, I like some comments. The MENA project, the very large concentrated solar power project, I saw videos that this is not working anymore. And that's a sad story. While in US, in large part of China, there are a lot of concentrated solar power projects. And here in Australia also, there's one that's being worked on. So this episode gave us a message that the Middle East is sort of just not giving up on oil. It's actually hedging the 21st century by investing in renewable energy. Now on item number 8, other issue that came up, the distributed solar actually helps fragile and post-conflict regions. I mean, this is something I really believed when I was working in Afghanistan many years ago, that the solution for Afghanistan, that everyone employed to import electricity from some other countries, but the solution in Afghanistan was big way off-grid solar. And that's what we are seeing in Pakistan in a big transformation and all over Australia outside. I mean, Western Australia, Horizon Power have been doing quite a bit, taking an area, turning them into mini grid, because that's sort of also useful. So the key takeaway was the multiple regional discussion I had, Lebanon, Pacific Islands, Mongolia, that distributed energy reduces dependence on imported oils. And that improved the whole macro level financials. And it also helps health issues through refrigeration and clinic reliability. If you're in the remote areas, you don't have to rely on a central system. And of course, it runs communication systems and others. And it can also improve the overall governance issues because it's sort of broken up system, it's distributed, it's controlled by multiple people. So that also helps. And the key takeaway from this, that electricity actually can keep peace, and literally, if everyone has electricity. The next topic came in, which is number 19, is very much at the heart of this podcast, that knowledge sharing and storytelling is actually accelerating transition. Because people need to know, and these technologies are quite simple. Electric vehicle is an example. I remember about 3 years ago, I was driving through rural Victoria and I was charging, and someone comes in saying, I've been thinking about this car. Tell me this, tell me that. And that person walked out confidently saying, yeah, I get it. I thought this was just an advertisement. Now I'm hearing from a driver. Same thing. Solar, you go to your neighbor. Ah, okay, it works. I will do it. Home batteries. So that knowledge sharing, the stories we tell to others really helps. And this came out in most of the conversation because stories change investors' confidence, and visible role model bring a lot of young people and others into this sort of climate carriers, like of a better words. Because misinformation is a big risk. Everybody talks about range anxiety on electric vehicles, not being able to charge at home. A lot of people even don't know that your car could be just plugged on a 220-volt system, which happening right now upstairs for me. So this storytelling aspect is very important. Again, positive stories inspire a lot of policymakers. And so this podcast, this community engagement helps. I clearly remember in Georgia, there was a discussion many years ago with an minister on electric bus project. And the discussion was on range anxiety. And then we went down to the details. What's the maximum range these buses do in a day based on the traffic jam and others? Pin drop silence. When you really go into actual numbers, and there somebody came in saying, hey, my bus can do this much. And then the policymaker in this context, the minister, he said, okay, we can look at those. And seeing is believing, storytelling helps us. So overall, I had a lot of good takeaway from the episode. The last one, the way we summarized it, is that the next decade belongs to integration, not invention. We need to bring things together. We need to orchestrate things. My home battery, my neighbor's home battery. How can it work together? How can we use that to define the power system of future? We don't need any more invention per se. Of course, invention will come and invention helps. But the most technologies exist. How do we integrate? How do you scale it up? That remains the challenge. And Tim Buckley on episode 291 said that clearly. Stephanie Bashir on episode 292, Robert Scholhammer on episode 280, Curtis Chin on episode 290. These are just some of the highlights. I think that message came through the whole year that the solar and batteries are cheap. We all know solar is as cheap as chips. Batteries are approaching $50 a kilowatt hour. Solar panel, sub 10 cents a watt, unthinkable. But we have to make sure that the people are trained, people understand how to put this thing together, how to design large-scale project, how do we bring policymakers, and that's where the challenge is. Regulations are lagging behind. How do we make sure regulators catch up? Like I was talking to someone on a project in Bangladesh, they said, we get subsidy for charger, but we don't get subsidized energy for battery swapping. Why? Then all we had to do, a battery swapping project will be considered as charging project because it's essentially doing the same, charging the battery, swapping, as opposed to directly charging the battery that's on the vehicle. This sort of little policy tweaking really helps because without that, we cannot move. Again, battery swapping could be very popular or will vanish tomorrow, depending on how the energy density is moving, how portable batteries become, how cheap they become. But again, regulation has to catch up. And that's where the challenge is. So overall, the innovation we need most now is institutional rather than technological. So these are all my summaries. I hoped we will keep continuing this relationship next year. But overall, I think the momentum that got created in the last 10 years will continue, especially in solar power. Solar should be everywhere. We should electrify everything. Electric vehicles, unstoppable, doesn't matter who says what. And finally, the vehicle to grid is going to change the world in a big way. Thank you for listening to Energypreneurs. Let's work together electrifying everything. This podcast is available in audio form on your favorite platforms and in video on YouTube. See you on next episode. Please feel free to subscribe to our channel, and we always appreciate your comments.